Hello friends, and welcome to another episode of Team Jesus Outdoors. Friends, when I was first introduced to open water trolling, I was pretty intimidated because it seemed overly complicated and very expensive. And hey, the truth of the matter is, it isn't cheap to get into open water trolling, and it isn't simple either. But you don't have to overcomplicate it, and you don't have to spend an absolute fortune to have an effective open water trolling game plan. So friends, I think the first question to ask when we're talking about inline planer boards is, why does somebody have to use inline planer boards to have an open water trolling game plan? The first reason is this. There are times, particularly in clear water, the clearer the water, the more that this is applicable. But there are times when trolling baits directly behind the boat is ineffective because the fish are simply spooky. And you need to get those baits out away from the boat to get those fish to bite. More importantly, inline planer boards allow us to be able to run a greater number of rods. In order to run 4 or 6 or 8 rods off of the average size boat, you're going to have to run inline planer boards, or you're going to be tangled up all day long. Okay, so we can agree, we should be able to agree at least, that an effective open water trolling system is going to require a way to get your baits out away from the boat and to be able to stagger your baits. So you can go old school with large planer boards run off of a mast. Particularly if you have a larger boat, you can get away with that. Or you can go with the standard inline planer board. So let's talk just for a quick second the typical function of an inline planer board. So on any inline planer board, you're going to have a system to be able to attach your line off of your rod to the planer board in at least 2 points. With all of these planer boards that we're talking about here today, you're going to have a main attachment point, and you're going to have a rear attachment point. With your bait at the end of your rod and a weighting system if necessary, and then your planer board attached, by deploying the planer board into the water, it's going to move out to the side of the boat, thus taking your bait off away from the side of the boat, either the starboard side or the port side. And you're going to have boards that are port side boards or left side boards. And you're also going to have boards that are starboard side or right side boards. So we're going to attach our line to our board at our 2 attachment points. We're going to send the board out. If we have a tattle flag system, when we get a bite, our bite's going to be detected by the tattle flag. So we have an indicator that we have a bite. Now we can reel that line in, detach the board quickly, and now you're fighting in the fish. So what separates one board from another? What is largely going to separate most of your boards is going to be those attachment points. This, for example, is a Yellowbird planer board. Now these are the stock releases that come on this planer board. We have a release in the rear that clips closed, holds your line in there with a couple of rubber pads. This release is relatively functional, although on this Yellowbird board I have found these releases to be pretty fragile. I've broken a few of them. And the front release system is two rubber coated surfaces, spring loaded, and our line simply pinches between the two rubber pads. Now this is an example of a board that is adjustable. By tightening or loosening this spring-loaded screw, we can change the tension on the line. And the reason that it's important to be able to adjust that line tension is for your various line types that you may choose to run, and so that you can decide whether you want your board to release under pressure or not release. A lot of guys run their boards set up so that they can intentionally release their board at any time they choose, whether that be to fight a fish without the interference of the board, or whether that be to release the board to bring in your bait for a bait change or a bait check, but to simply release the board without having to fight the board back to the boat. This particular planer board is a Mr. Walleye board by Tattle. The Mr. Walleye board has a relatively unique system. You have this spring-loaded pin right here, and if you can see in that slot, when I pull that pin, the slot is open. You can slide your line down into that slot, and when you release the pin now penetrates both sides of the board, and your line will not come out of the slot. Now that is a pretty solid attachment point. I've never had that attachment point fail. You are not going to have that. 99.9% of the time you are never going to have to worry about the line coming out of this attachment point. Now the Mr. Walleye boards, these are an old set that I've had for 20 years or more. These Mr. Walleye boards came with a metal surface very similar to the Yellowbird system, but without the rubber coating. Now what I have done sometime a long time ago, I didn't like those two metal surfaces. It was too easy for line to slip, even under great tension. So I replaced that many years ago with just a simple release system. Now this simple release clip will allow the line to be released from this clip by giving it a good sharp tug or under the weight of a heavy fish. So once the line is freed from this clip, now the line is only attached at the rear, so the board floats to the surface, allowing you to fight the fish unhindered or bring your board across your spread of lines with much less risk of tangling. Now the downside of having your board set up to release is if you have a system of, if your board has two attachment points, both of them that are able to be released, you run the risk of both of them coming unattached and your board floats off and you've lost a board. And whether you're talking about an inexpensive board like an $18 Yellowbird board, or you're talking about an expensive board like a $40 plus offshore board, either way it's not something that you want to lose in a day of fishing. In fact, it's a really good idea to write your name and your telephone number somewhere on your boards in Sharpie, so that if you do happen to lose a board, somebody finds it, they can call you, and hopefully you get your board back. these Cabela advanced angler boards, at least to the best that I can tell, I don't see a way to set these releases up to release your line. So here's an example of a board where once you've clipped your line in here, once you've clipped your line in both of these attachment points, your line's not coming out of here unless one of these fail. So while you now don't run the risk of losing your board when you're bringing in a fish, if this board happens to be pulled underwater by a large fish, you've got a lot more opportunity to lose your fish. Or if you're bringing this board in to clear weeds off the board or to change a bait, or for whatever reason you're bringing this board in out from the middle of your spread, there's a real good chance that you're going to tangle up your lines trying to bring this back to the boat. So as far as I'm concerned, the perfect board either comes out of the box or is accessorizable to the extent that I can either set it up to release or set it up not to release, depending on how I'm fishing on that particular application. Say for example, maybe I'm only running 4 lines. Maybe I'm only running 2 lines to either side of the boat. So bringing one of the 2 boards in without having to bring in both lines is going to be less difficult. Fighting a fish on the outside line is not going to be terribly difficult because the fish is generally going to pull the board back to some degree, and by giving the fish a little bit of line, you can let the board drop back and fight the board after it's cleared your inside board. So there are times when I don't want my clips to release. But one of the things that I love about the Offshore board is that you can run the old standard orange clips that will release your line under a certain amount of tension, or you can run these red clips that have, maybe you can see this, these red clips have a small nipple inside of there, and if you get your line inside of that nipple, your line's not coming out of these red clips. Now I'm a big fan of the OR18. This is an OR16 clip. I'm a big fan of the newer OR18 clip, which this clip can be released in one of 2 ways. You can set this clip up by putting your line through here and pressing it in the down position, and now you can set the tension on this to where if you want your line to be able to come out, you can set the tension accordingly. If you do not want this clip to release, you can attach it in the upper position, and now you have this pin. This pin is a secondary mechanism that will prevent your line from being released. So the OR18 snapper, while kind of expensive, I think these are about 18 bucks a piece. While kind of expensive, this OR18 snapper gives you a great deal of flexibility and allowing you to fish your boards however you want to fish your boards. Again, the Cabela's advanced angler boards, quite the opposite. Without removing these releases and changing them out with something different, you're stuck with releases that cannot be adjusted. You cannot adjust this release to release your line under pressure. The next thing I look at in boards is durability. As I've already mentioned, I've had the releases on the Yellowbird boards break. I've had a release on the Cabela's advanced angler board break. These church tackle boards are probably the most durable boards I've ever owned. I have run these boards down south fishing for striped bass. I've run these boards back in the creeks, up into the rocks, up into the bushes, and these things take a licking and keep on ticking. This is a super durable board, but much like the offshore board, these are not cheap. The offshore board, to me, is really kind of the best of both worlds. This board is super durable, very accessorizable. They track excellently. Other than the price, I really just don't have anything bad to say about the offshore board. In my opinion, the offshore board is the king of the inline planer boards. If your budget doesn't allow you to go to the more expensive boards, or you're just new to the game and you want to test out your open water trolling game before you really get all invested in it, then it may be wise to go with something like the Yellowbird boards or the Cabela's advanced angler boards. Either one of these you can get into a set for less than 50 bucks. So they're a little bit less than half of an offshore board or a church's tackle board. If you're looking at the economy line of boards like these, then you've got to ask yourself, do you want your releases to be adjustable? If so, I would look at the Yellowbird. I ran these for 3 or 4 years, and I mean, honestly, I was able to make these do the trick. They don't track near as nicely as the larger boards, like the offshore side planer or the Mr. Walleye boards, but they track reasonably well, and they are adjustable, and they also have a functional tattle flag. Now, right out of the package, a standard set of OR12 offshore boards have a flag, but it's not a functional tattle flag. It's simply a rigid flag. The tattle flag allows you to detect much lighter bites that may not pull the board back. It'll also let you know if you've collected some grass, and so the flag is simply staying back because it's got some grass on the bait. To me, when you're talking about walleye fishing or any species in that size, the tattle flag is invaluable. It can be very, very hard to detect that you've had a bite or a fish on the board if you don't have a functional tattle flag. Now, when I'm fishing for striped bass or when I'm fishing for muskie, I'll use these church tackle boards. I don't need the flag. I certainly don't need a tattle flag, because large fish are going to pull this board back noticeably. In fact, quite often a large fish simply takes this underwater like a great big bobber. I think whether a guy wants an economy set of boards or a great set of boards, either way, one of the 4 brands of planer board that we have here in this discussion will perfectly suit the bill for what you're looking for. Friends, I'm sure there are some things that I've forgotten to include in this discussion. Please leave any comments and questions down in the comment box below. If I don't know the answer to your question, I'll find the answer to your question. I hope this information's been helpful to you. I appreciate you watching Team Jesus Outdoors. Hey, would you go ahead and smash that like button? Go ahead and click subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Make sure to leave us a comment in the comment box below. Hey friends, God bless, Tattle. All right, we're fishing.
You got another box?
Yeah, there's a box of bandits up there.